سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. These ayahs today, probably many Muslims don't know the implication. And Allah Azza wa Jal said, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ليس عليك هداهم ولكن الله يهدي من يشاء وما تنفقوا من خير فلأنفسكم وما تنفقوا إلا ابتغاء وجه الله وما تنفقوا من خير يوفى إليكم وأنتم لا تظلمون. Now, here Allah Azza wa Jal talk about economy, business, financial affair, and he addressed it in sequence, the end of the Surah Al-Baqarah, that people who will need support, financial support, for personal reason or for business, they will have either to rely on the charity, which is, charity could include, obviously we're talking about charity and zakah. Zakah, there's 8 type of people who will take zakah. One of them is actually people in business who are bankrupt, in debt, called gharimin, and these have like 12.5% of the zakah. But also talking about charity, could give it to anybody, for multiple reasons, whatever reasons, whether it's to build a mosque or to build a street or alaikum salam. But zakah, that has to be given to 8 type of people. Naam Suleiman.
Is there a difference between sadaqah and zakah?
Yes, what I'm saying. Zakah is a precise percentage of your saving, and it is given to. Can you move slightly to the middle? Yeah. So yeah, that's it. I can't see him now. According to the ayah in Surah At-Tawbah, it's the 8 type of people. إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها مؤلفة قلوبهم والغاربين وفي الرقاب وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل. So these are the type of people who can take zakah. And والمؤلفة قلوبهم. So you can give zakah to rich business people who struggle with debt, or they have problem with the finance, they can't sort their finance, and you can give it to people who are close to Muslims, مؤلفة قلوبهم, those who have like the Muslims and they don't fight Muslims, obviously. But this ayah is actually came because some of the Sahaba, when they became Muslims, their relations still are not Muslims. They were still kafirin.
No, but sadaqah and zakah, can you use it for both? Can you use sadaqah and zakah as the same?
Sadaqah, you can use it for any reason. You can use it to build a bridge, you can use it to build a school.
So zakah is specifically the 2.5%. And
the zakah, 2.5% on the liquid money, 5% on agriculture, 10% on agriculture needs no attendance, and 20 on liquid money, 2.5% on liquid money, 5% on agriculture, 20% on resources which you get out of underground.
My question is can you use the word sadaqah and it means zakah, like it's the same word? Do they mean the same thing? That's my question.
No, that's what I'm trying to explain.
They don't mean
Zakah, every year you see how much saving you have. You had last Ramadan 5,000 pounds. This Ramadan you have 6,000 pounds. You pay zakah on the 5,000 pounds.
Yeah.
Sadaqah, you had last year 1,000 pounds. You have this year 500 pounds. You give sadaqah 500 pounds. While in zakah, you only give zakah if your saving is 85 grams of gold or more. And the price of the gold, 85, would be around 5,000 pounds,
so
4.5.
you can use for anything. It's just charity that's outside of
Sadaqah you can use for anything, yeah.
Okay.
Zakah you can't.
Yes. So if I may, this question comes up a lot because I run a charity, and the main distinction, Suleiman, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, is that sadaqah is for material things like schools and mosques. Correct me if I'm wrong, but for those sort of things, whereas zakat is actually for food for the poor people who need it now.
I think I sometimes I was wondering like this, if this answers your question more, is that zakat is a prescribed mandatory thing actually got to do on your money every day. And the way I understand it, sadaqah, you can do it any time.
Voluntary. So sadaqah is just any extra charity
It's any
you give
extra,
outside
yeah.
of
That's how I
zakat.
answer your question.
Okay.
It's not any all any.
2.5%, you can't spend it on bridges and schools and hospitals.
But that's different. I think like two
No,
different.
but I was under the
Important.
assumption now that sadaqah or zakah is essentially just a tax. The government takes a tax and they
That's
can use that for
exactly.
whatever.
No, zakah is not like a tax. Zakah
But not
has to be given to a type of people.
But those that's not specifically the poor, the needy.
The only one which they play with, they have some relaxation is fi sabilillah, for the sake of Allah.
Right.
That could be when we were collecting money to buy the mosque. We asked the scholars, and they said, if you are in a foreign country and you are really struggling and you don't have any Ministry of Religious Affairs and things, you can use some of the zakah money to build a mosque. But in Muslim countries, they don't allow it.
There was a hadith I had, I can't remember it exactly, but I think it was during the time of, I think it was Abu Bakr or Umar, where they were collecting zakat. They had like a lot of extra zakat that they didn't need to spend on poor people. So they're like, okay, make the road.
Oh, that's the time of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz.
Yeah,
That's around 100 years after. They were left with a lot of
build roads and this
yeah,
and this.
they were left with a lot of money. There's no takers to it because they all had their shares and this and this.
Yeah.
So he actually fed animals and
So he
used it.
things outside
Yeah,
of-
and that's obviously our leader decides that we have no people to need that zakah. But this ayah here, that these kafirin who are still unbelievers and they are related to the Muslims, they need money, they need help.
Yeah.
And they asked the Prophet ﷺ, can we give them part of our money or zakah or charity or sadaqah? And Allah Azza wa Jal sent this ayah, yes. They are not guided, they are not Muslims, but it's not your job to make them Muslim. لَيْسَ عَلَيْكَ هُدَاهُمْ. You don't have to bring them to Islam. It's not required from you, O Messenger, to set them on the right path. But Allah set them on the right path and set on the right path on those who He pleases. مَنْ يَشَاء. مَنْ يَشَاء here, who Allah Azza wa Jal wishes, or whoever wanted to be guided. If you wanted to be guided, you ask Allah Azza wa Jal, Allah will guide you. But you don't stop giving them charity and sadaqah. And that's what's actually kept them inside the love to the Muslims in a way. And they became Muslims, most of them, nearly all of them became Muslims. So Islam is not restricting charities to only Muslims. And you don't give them zakah, like we said, unless they are مؤلفة قلوبهم, their heart are really like the Muslims. But there could be, they are not interested in Muslims, but they are in need. This is where Muslim charity can't go to non-Muslims, according to this ayah. And Allah Azza wa Jalla said, whatever you spend, it's good for you. It's not, you're not treating the poor, you're not giving the poor, you are giving Allah Azza wa Jalla what Allah created and He made you in charge of. وَمَا تُنْفِقُونَ إِلَّا ابْتِغَاءَ وَجْهِ اللَّهِ. You only spend for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. You're only seeking the face of Allah, the pleasure of Allah, the acceptance from Allah. وَمَا تُنْفِقُوا مِنْ خَيْرٍ يُوَفَّى إِلَيْكُمْ. Whatever you give, obviously good. If somebody chooses to give the bad things, obviously Allah is not going to accept. Like we read the ayah before, like لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ إِلَّا حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. You're not going to achieve piety unless you spend from what you like personally. You like it, so you spend it. And وأنتم لا تظلمون وما تنفقوا من خير you will be paid back, and you will not be treated unjustly. You will be treated even more than what you give. Usually tens of times more, hundreds of times more, even more than that. And Allah Azza wa Jal said, talk about a type of people who you might skip them, not knowing they are in need. Allah Azza wa Jal listed here these people, للفقراء الذين أحصروا في سبيل الله. They're poor, but they are like Ahl al-Suffa. They were there ready to fight for the sake of Allah. They are ready to defend Medina. They are ready to help the Muslims. Any project, they used to be straight away up to the job. And they are usually single Muslims, and they are living in Sufa, in the back of the mosque of the Prophet ﷺ. And some of them were really desperate need for help, for money, but they were not seeking money. They're not asking people to help. And you think that أحصروا في سبيل الله لا يستطيعون ضربا في الأرض. They cannot go and leave the mosque and leave Medina and go and fight their rizq, their sustenance, find jobs and things. And يحسبهم الجاهل, the one who is ignorant of them, he thinks they are rich because they just don't ask. They feel quite, or show they are quite satisfied, and they're quite happy, and their modesty will stop them from appearing really poor. You know them by looking at them. And this is here where people really need to develop the skills of finding out whether they're his friends, his neighbors, his relatives are in need or not. One of the scholars, pious people, were in his house, and somebody knocked on his door, and he went, opened the door, and one of his friends, and he asked him that he's in need for help. So he went inside, took some money, and went back and gave him the money, and came back crying. So his wife asked him, "Why are you crying?" He said, "Because so and so, I didn't know he needed money." And his wife, she said, "But you gave him money, so you know." He said, "Yes, but I should have spotted that he's in need before he came to ask." Because people have their, they feel shame of asking, embarrassed to ask, so they don't ask. You need to spot actually who is really in need and give him before they ask. لا يسألون الناس إلحافا. They don't ask people even for ilhaf. Ilhaf is the stone of the date when there is some slight, like a string there. You throw it away. Even that which have no value, they will not ask you to give it to them. So they were really modest, and they keep their face from losing respect or losing value, and that's important when you have friends. You really need to genuinely help and keep them as friends. وَمَا تُنْفِقُوا مِنْ خَيْرٍ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ بِهِ عَلِيمٌ. And whatever you spend of good things, Allah Azza wa Jal is aware of it. So Allah Azza wa Jal always expects you to give khair, something which is good, really of value. And then Allah Azza wa Jal said, الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُم بِاللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ سِرًّا وَعَلَانِيَةً فَلَهُمْ أَجْرُهُمْ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ وَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. And this ayah shows that actually there are people who truly could be even giving at night, in the evening. And like I mentioned last week about Ali Zain al-Abidin, his spending and his giving to the poor was always at night. He goes from door to door to door and he delivers the things. In Yemen, I was listening to Sheikh Sharawi. He was working in, not in Yemen, in Jeddah, and somebody was giving him a lift. So he found outside the house a bag of, or a big casserole of doubt or dot, ajin. What ajin? Duff. And he stopped the car. He took it, put it in the car, and he went to the baker, and the baker baked it. And then on his way back, he took the bread to the house. And Sharawi was amazed. So what's that? It doesn't exist in Cairo. Like, we don't have this. He said if the father of the house or the husband is away or sick and he can't take it to the baker, they usually leave it by the door, which means that somebody will take it. So when I spotted that, means that this has to be taken to the baker, bake it, and take the bread ready to the people, which is really something really nice and still exists in, Firasa. Yeah, you spot that and you act. Nice tea, Jazakumullah khair. You always remember that. So الذين ينفقون أموالهم, they spend their money and effort and knowledge. And nowadays, like I had 6 text messages this morning before 8 o'clock. Some student asking me about, but the answer will not be, a short sentence. Has to be explained. And so I said, probably ask me after the school will be better. But sometimes I do get asked 1 o'clock in the morning. Somebody couldn't sleep, but just want an answer to this, and somebody is stuck in a situation, or sometimes, please pray to us for, my father, my wife, and there's a brother who actually formed Gannam's family. I said, I thought it was one of my children formed it. He said he formed it actually because his son was very sick, and he thought he could ask all of us to pray. Alhamdulillah, his son came out home today, and he's better there, alhamdulillah. So you don't, this is one of the jobs. Like a doctor, you could be woken up in the middle of the night, but as a imam or something, people could ask you, could wake you up. So spend from what you are good at, not only money, help and expertise and advice. And one day we had a neighbor who's gone to have a meal with his wife and left his children with his mom, his elderly mom. And she thought there's somebody with a chisel trying to get into the house. So she came, knocked on our door. I went with my wife. No, nobody's stealing. And on our way out, we noticed there's a hamster who was scratching the things. So she missed. So I said to my daughter, Hanadi, probably stay with her till her son come. So that's not actually food or drink, or just keep the mother and the grandmom comfortable and feel safe. And so he came up past 12, middle of the night. So ينفقون أموالهم, and expertise and help and support بالليل والنهار, سرا, secretly, and openly. And sometimes you need actually at least few people to do spend openly. Sometimes I'm sure Athar will know that sometimes you might have to hide the donors, because sometimes if people donate openly or you tell their names, some crooks might go and ask for money just to make use of these people. So we don't actually announce the name of donors.
Some people want to be just anonymous donors.
Yeah, unless he openly come and he wanted to be known, or he didn't think about it. But we don't usually inform people. Yeah, we get, alhamdulillah, we have more money in in the bank, and who donated this? It's like one of my when I was with the SMCA, we had the accountant, and Suhail was the accountant, and he said, "Oh, I want to know all this money, where it came from, whatever." Then he looked into all these receipts, and then there were 10,000, more than 10,000 more. Where these came from? I said, I don't know, from Allah. So it's not like, the account was short. The account was far much more than what you expect. And they will have their rewards, فَلَهُمْ أَجْرُهُمْ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ, and no fear for them and no sadness for them. They will be really happy for that. So this is a reassurance. And Allah Azza wa Jal then touched the other topic. So you have either you give them charity, or you give them zakah, or you give them both, or give them help, physical, mental, psychological, whatever. And the other way of giving used to be lending. Lending for and charge interest is what Allah Azza wa Jal banned. الذين يأكلون الربا لا يقومون إلا كما يقوم الذي يتخبطه الشيطان من المس. Those who take riba, the day of judgment will come out of their graves, will be trembling and shivering and having like attacks like the one who's touched by shaitan. We don't know what shaitan does, we don't know what mess is, but obviously in this dunya, Allah Azza wa Jal said in the Quran that إنه لا سلطان له على الذين آمنوا وعلى ربهم يتوكلون. They have no control over the believers and who they rely on Allah Azza wa Jal. The shaitan only have control over those who choose to follow shaitan, follow shaitanic ideas. Now riba, they said, which here they call riba, in fact, product, and they sell you product. Subhanallah, it's the same word used here by the mushrikeen in Mecca. ذلك بأنهم قالوا إنما البيع مثل الربا. Selling and buying is like riba. You sell money and you get money back. You sell him this £1,000, and with the condition he gets it back 1,100 with 10%. Or you sell him, over 30 years. You keep taking part of your money over that. And Allah Azza wa Jal said, I know, but it's haram. Bay'a, selling and buying, is halal. Riba is haram. وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى. So Allah Azza wa Jal made it haram. And whoever accept the advice of Allah Azza wa Jal, مَنْ جَاءَهُ مَوْعِظَةٌ مِّن رَبِّهِ فَانْتَهَى. If you accept the advice of your Lord and you stop, you will get your capital, but the current capital. You don't go back like what you lent last 10 years, you go take it back from people. No, it's not. It's the current capital. Just cancel it. There's no interest on that. And you get your capital back. And وَأَمْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ. And whoever does that again, his affair belongs to Allah Azza wa Jalla. And whoever does that again, there will be people of hellfire, and they will stay there eternally. When you listen to the meaning of riba, when they translate this ayah, our scholars, they obviously they think of the riba at the time of the Prophet ﷺ and later in years. The problem is started in America, although riba was in Europe all the time, but America, they created the vaults because there were a time when there were gold rush and people had gold because they discovered gold in part of America. Now we can't drop this.
It's permanent.
Yeah, some teachers chose to. So you have the vault, and people were storing gold because there they were obviously in suppose you borrowed 10 ounces of gold and you need to give back 11 ounces of gold. Where will you get the gold from? If you didn't make money and you earned gold, you need to go and steal it from somebody to give it back to the lender. So what they did, they created these vaults, and they said, you keep our gold with us, and this is well protected, well secured, well manned and things, and thieves will have no access to your gold, and you get it back. And they give you a receipt. And they called the vault took the name of bank. They give you a banknote. You bring the note, and they will give you the gold. Many people to travel to another city and give the gold and bring the gold and buy something else and give the gold to the guy. Say to him, I'll give you the banknote. I have 10 ounces there. You take the note and you cash the gold. So started accepting that. And they noticed that only 13% of people come and claim their gold out of the vault. So the vault have always 87% of the gold stored in it. So what they did, they started lending it. Lending 87% of the gold and charge interest. And then the owners of the gold came to know about this system, and they came to the bank and they said, no, we want a share of this interest you're charging. So the bank started giving interest on the gold you save. And that went on until 1914. The banknote started taking a name in the 19th century, and they called it dollar. And then they made agreement that every $20, they will exchange it for an ounce of gold. In 1914, they started spending a lot of dollars. They don't have gold cover for it, so they changed it to $35 for ounce of gold. In a way, they chopped the price of the dollar by half. They took 50% of the value of the dollar, and that remained $35 per ounce. Till 1 ounce till 1971, when Richard Nixon floated the price of gold and said, we won't give you $35, we'll give you whatever the gold worth. And overnight the gold became $80 an ounce. So in overnight the price of the dollar dropped to the third of its value, $80. Now today the price is $2,020 an ounce. So how much the value of the dollar dropped? Massively compared to the value of the dollar in 1971 and compared to the value of the dollar in 1914. But the disaster came when, say, I have three people to actually blame for all the poverty across the globe now and the fight and dictators and the wars and things. Three people to blame: Richard Nixon, Margaret Thatcher, and Ronald Reagan. Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, they allowed the banks to lend money they don't have, and they called it fractional reserve banking. So they start lending 10 times more money than what they have, and banks were allowed also to lend money, mortgage, to buy a house without having the money, but then they have their name on the deed, so they own the house. They have 400,000 liability. They own a house for 400,000, 20, so are breaking even, no problem. Companies were also allowed to sell bonds, raise money, and from nothing. They give you a bond, company bond, and they get money, they raise money. So they create money from nothing. The bank create money from nothing. And the government print money from nothing. They can, no problem. They sell you government bonds. So the value of the money now keep dropping. So they're stealing the value of the money. And now probably the only thing I said once in one of my khutbah, probably the only thing which is harmless the bank do is charging interest or paying interest. Because if you put £100 in the bank or £1,000 and the inflation 4%, by the end of the year will be 9,060. The worth value of your money, £9,060, if the inflation is 4%. If the bank give you 2% interest, at least you recover some of the value of your money. So if you look into what good things the bank do, is giving you interest because they reduce the loss of the value of your money. But the sinister thing they do, they put in the market so much money through the fractional reserve banking, through the banking itself, the mortgages and things. All these credit cards, the banks lend money every single day, $3.5 trillion. They create money from nothing every single day, $3.5 trillion, because you don't pay interest and you don't pay anything for 25 days. After 25 days, you start paying back a fraction of it, minimum 5%. But they create money from nothing. So who's creating money and putting it in the market, reducing the value of the market? Like if somebody has a chicken farm producing 3.5 trillion eggs a day. So what will be the price of eggs? It will be zero, nothing. We just throw it for people to eat. So they are creating so much money every single day through the government bonds, the company bonds, and the bank loans, fractional reserve and mortgages, and credit cards. So they are stealing the value of the money across the globe. And people just don't know it. So when you come to listen to the scholars who don't know economy, they will say, oh, riba haram. On what? Nobody is lending me gold and giving the gold back. He's lending me pound, and when I give him the money back, the value dropped. It's like the value of my wage, the first wage when I was a doctor, left medical school, went to work in hospital, was 600 Syrian pounds per month. 600 per month. And we were working Monday, Saturday to Friday morning, 24/6. Now, the pound will buy you 18,600 Syrian pound. So my wage will be a fraction of a pence a month. The value of the Syrian pound dropped to the fraction. And you now the dollar, the Lebanese lira is 100,000. Yeah. Lebanese lira.
I came here in 85, I think it was 2.5 lira.
2.5 lira the pound.
The pound was 2.5 lira.
Now the dollar will buy 100,000 Lebanese pound, and probably the British pound will buy 127 Lebanese, because it's 1.27 now today. So the bank now in Egypt and in Turkey and other countries, they're giving 50% interest. If you put money, they will give you 50% interest. Why would you do that? Why would they do that? Why would they give 50% interest?
Because the value.
Because the value drops by 90%. They try to keep the value by giving you incentive to buy the Egyptian pound and Turkish lira. Now the Egyptian pound today is the Egyptian pound. The British pound will buy you 40 Egyptian pound. But my brother said that actually the dollar now buy you 60 Egyptian pound. So there's now a black market in the making, which disappeared for a while, now came back. So this interest is just think of the past. You need to really reprogram your brain that now there is money coming from nothing, and governments and banks and companies give themselves right to print money from nothing. And unless you avoid money, the banknotes, you will be in the loss. There's no way you're going to succeed. If you are on a wage, unless you get every year a wage increase equal to the inflation rate and the GDP, the growth of the wealth in that country, you will be on strike like the doctors and nurses and ambulance men and taxis and railway drivers and everybody on strike, because the wage is now ridiculous. The wage needs to be increased by 1,019. I calculated the nurses' wages. There's no way they're going to increase it by 1,019. So Allah Azza wa Jal, يمحق الله الربا. If the riba didn't start from the bank in America in the 19th century, 18th and 19th century, and people were still relying on the gold in their hands, things would have been okay. People who want to trade with interest is haram, according to Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. But at least a large portion of people will have the value of their money in their pocket. When they agreed to replace their money by banknotes, and the game started in America, they can't now reverse it. It's extremely difficult. You can't forget it. You're not going to cancel banks. If there's no banks now, there will be no money. There will be zero money. Money always created from nothing. And if you close the banks, there will be no money at all. And the whole countries will collapse. This is why they prepared to rescue banks. Although the crooks, they stole the money. They went and bought all sorts of luxury houses and yachts and this and that, and they made the bank go bankrupt. But the government cannot afford to close the bank, so they go and rescue the bank. They rescued Northern Rock, they rescued Lloyds, they rescued National Scottish Royal Bank of Scotland and the Bank of Scotland, and quite a few banks in America also, they rescued banks. Also, they broke actually their own fall by themselves. And the ayah, Allah Azza wa Jal talking here about الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وأقاموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة لهم أجرهم عند ربهم ولا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. Establish a prayer and give zakah. The country claim that they need more money every year because they need to cover the shortcome of they can't increase the taxes, and they need money to new project. They need money for the poor, for the sick, for this. But 2.5% of the wealth, if it's collected every year, will be more than enough. You don't need more than 2.5% of the wealth of the wealthy to come back and save you from printing money. And if you calculate it, you will be left with even more money. This is why Umar ibn Abdul Aziz left with a lot of money. Sulaiman, yeah, your question. He was left with a lot of money because he was relying on zakah. That he fed the animals with it. What shall I do with the money? I have so much money. So he even gave the Christian money to get his businesses running, gave the Jewish money to get a business, to get married, whatever, and then still more money. Because you're taking 2.5% minimum from the wealth of everybody. So this is the answer. But Muslim, I wrote. Somebody was talking about banks and against banks. He's from Morocco, and this is evil. This is that evil. Then I wrote to him on YouTube. I said, I lent my brother £30,000 to build his flat. Now, if he gives me 20 years ago, if he gives me now that £30,000, will not be even enough to buy a lock. It was able to buy a door, now not able to buy a lock to the door. Or a few screws you can buy with the 30,000, because the sandwich now, if you want falafel sandwich, will be £3,000. So we'll be buying 10 sandwich of falafel too. And then Allah Azza wa Jal moved to the Ayat al-Dain. But before he moved to Ayat al-Dain, the lending, how lending regulated in Islam, he did threaten that be mindful of Allah Azza wa Jal and leave whatever there of riba if you are believers, but if you don't, then be informed that Allah Azza wa Jal will lead a war against you and his messenger. A war. Now there's not a single war, there's so many wars. Behind it is economy. Behind it is the this land and that land, this water and that water, this facility and that facility is and the war and disruptions across the globe is building up now. Even it could be more to come. But if you repent, you will have your capital. No justice will be committed against you, and you will not be dealt unjustly. But if somebody has this also to give people who don't have the ability to pay back, you need to give them free, time to get money and pay you back if they couldn't pay the loan. But the loan then regulated with this ayah الذين آمنوا إذا تداينتم بدين إلى أجل مسمى فاكتبوه واتقوا الله يوما ترجعون فيه إلى الله. You always have to be mindful of a day you will go back to Allah Azza wa Jal, and every soul will be accountable for what it has earned, and no injustice will be committed. But now I was watching one of the programs. They buy oil. You can buy oil or gold or iron or copper or whatever, and you pay 10% in the future market. As a Muslim guy from America, he bought 256,000 barrels of oil, and that to receive it in May 2020. Now, what happened to the oil price at that time? Nobody wanted to buy oil. So the oil was coming and nobody buying it. People couldn't sell the oil. Then the time for the oil delivery was in May, 18th of May or something. If you don't buy the oil, they will deliver it to your address. So who will get to his house 256,000 barrels of oil? And you have to pay the full amount, obviously. So he ended having $13.5 million in debt. And the price of oil became minus $38. They will give you $38 if you take a barrel of oil off their shoulders. So if you have swimming pool, you can fill it with oil. And so they have a place in America. They full of tanks for oil, and those who can't deliver, they deliver it for them to that area. So if you go in details and you look how much injustice committed across the globe and how many people go bankrupt and how many people commit suicide because of that, and it all originated from riba. And we ate all the time for the topic. The topic is not actually